to this podcast. I'm Justice Leah Ward Sears. I'm a retired justice from the Georgia Supreme Court. Just a quick background. I served on the Georgia Supreme Court for 17 years. Before that, I was a Superior Court judge, and before that, I was a lawyer on the City Court of Atlanta, and before that, I was an attorney with the law firm of Alston and Bird. I am currently a partner in the law firm of Smith, Gambrell, Russell, and I'm happy to moderate this panel today with these two great, giant judges. Why don't we start with Honorable Tanya R. Kennedy? Do you mind telling a little bit about yourself before we jump in, Judge Kennedy?
Sure. Good afternoon. And it's such an honor and privilege to, what I would say, be with two rock star judges. I have been a judge for 16 years, elected in 2005. I joined the appellate court in July 2020. I sit on the appellate division, First Judicial Department. I've also been a former adjunct professor at Fordham University School of Law. I am active in a number of bar and judicial associations and was the past president of the National Association of Women Judges.
And Judge Troutman.
Hi, I am currently an associate judge of the New York State Court of Appeals, which is New York's highest court for those of you outside of the state of New York. I began my legal career as an assistant district attorney, and then I went on to become an assistant attorney general and an assistant United States attorney for the Western District of New York. As an assistant attorney general and an assistant United States attorney, I represented the United States and, of course, the state in civil litigation matters. And I was very fortunate. At age 33, I was appointed to our entry-level court here in New York, which is the City Court of Buffalo. I served in the City Court of Buffalo for just shy of 10 years. Thereafter, I served on the county court. I then was elected to New York State Supreme Court, served as a trial court judge, and then was appointed to our intermediate appellate court, the Appellate Division 4th Department. And then this January, I was nominated and then confirmed by the New York Senate to join the New York State Court of Appeals.
Well, congratulations on your new position. It's wonderful. So let's start off with, because I'm interested in knowing what your thoughts are. What changes do you think need to occur for judicial positions to become more diverse and representative of the country as a whole? I personally believe that there needs to be an intentional effort made in that direction, and because it's just not going to happen without intentionality. And but I'd be interested in your thoughts.
Well, I've had the honor of serving as co-chair in New York of the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission. And that particular commission, it doesn't just focus on justice as it relates to judges, but with respect to everyone in the courthouse. In other words, when many of our citizens come into the courthouse, they see at the front door people that don't look like them, and then it goes on and on from there. So the commission believes that it is important that there is diversity at every level so that people that they have trust and confidence in the court system, that their suspicions don't become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so we've worked very hard at the Franklin H. Williams Judicial Commission to diversify the courts at all levels. But with respect to the courts themselves, we have done programs on how to become a judge. As the president of the New York State chapter of the National Association of Women Judges, we mentor, which is very, very important. And that's been something that I have had in my entire career, mentors, male and female. And I think in your life, at different seasons of your life, different people can be the right person that you need at that juncture. I have testified in New York before the Senate with respect to changing how judges are elected in order to increase diversity.
Are judges elected in New York or appointed? Are they elected or appointed by the legislature or a combination of all of them?
The latter.
Okay. So it's a hodgepodge.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. And do you think, and I'll turn this to Judge Kennedy, does that hinder women of color from advancing? The hodgepodge nature of the selection of judges?
If I may take a step back,
Okay.
Judge Sears, because intentionality is everything, but I also think that we need to change the narrative. And we change the narrative by doing what we're doing today and certainly building the pipeline. And I believe that you have to start very early. You have to start in elementary school and work your way up. And the reason why I say this is that in order to be it, you have to see it. So when young people, when they see us, when we share our stories, that gives them the information about how to become a judge and also the motivation. But in addition, when we have allies, people who do not look like us,
Right.
who provide opportunities, and then we're given the chance to prove ourselves. So just as Judge Trotman said, it's about mentoring, sponsorships, which are even more important than mentors, and having these programs, giving future judges the information about what they need to do. And now I'll answer the other question. I was both elected. I became a judge at 38. I'm now 55. I was elected to civil court. That's the lower trial court. And then certainly to Supreme Court, the higher trial court, and certainly appointed by the governor. And I would say that money is a big challenge. I have been fortunate that when I took the bench in 2005, I did not have a primary. So I was elected by being uncontested. Certainly, I did have a fundraising committee for various things that also took place in Supreme Court as well. But I can tell you that with the primaries, it has become very, very expensive. And so there are issues with fundraising. Certainly you have a committee who does that. I take the position, particularly when you are a trial court judge, I think that the elective process allows for more underrepresented persons to ascend to the bench, as opposed to the appointment process, because very often we are not on committees' radar. We're not in their Rolodex, and I'll talk a little bit about that more.
Would you change things, both of you, Because you're both in New York. Would you change it so that all the judges are elected?
Well, let me say this.
Okay.
I disagree that simply being appointed means that you have greater opportunity. I think changes need to be made in a number of different ways, and that there isn't a one-size-fits-all.
Okay.
For instance, when I began my legal career, I basically got a new position every 2 to 3 years, without looking for one. And then when I became a city court judge, I thought that was the end of my career. And even though I will say I became a judge because someone else saw something in me and they suggested that I pursue it. At first, I thought that it was an impossibility. So I agree with Justice Kennedy that you do need those people in your lives, and you do need to see people like you.
Right.
So here in Western New York, it looked very different than downstate. When I went to judges school after becoming a judge initially, I went to New York and I was overjoyed to see the diversity on the bench. I will say I've been a judge long enough, however, to see that the numbers have dwindled, especially with respect to black males. That diversity is no longer as rich. When I was on city court, I sought Supreme Court time after time, and I was told no. So I decided to run for Erie County Court, and I ran in a contested primary and a general election. That is the only way that I was able to move from one court to another, was to directly ask the citizens. However, when I was on the county court, I was then given an opportunity to move to Supreme Court and received bipartisan support. So those two things had to happen for me to be on the radar. So I say that a combination, and it depends on where you live.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I was elected. I went to the citizens and asked them to vote for me for what we call Superior Court judge, which is I think that's what you call the Supreme Court.
Correct.
And I won that race, and then the Supreme Court opening came up, and the governor appointed me to that position because there was a need. What do you think is the underlying the problem with the dearth of black men judges? You're saying there were more when we got started, less now. And I come to think of it, I'm noticing that too.
They're less going to law school.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then I think the best and brightest are probably going to big law or big firms or what have you. I had
Absolutely.
And I also think it's, I know this is a kind of traditional, but judges generally don't make a lot of money. They don't make the kind of money you can as a lawyer. I'm not going to say you guys we were poor and all that, because that's not the case. But I had a cousin who was the first African American on the Supreme Court of Virginia back in the day. This was back in the 80s. He had a wife, and then he was 32 when he was appointed to the bench. And then he got married, and then he had 3 children. And he could not afford, he just simply could not afford, he was making $80,000 at the time. That was in the just couldn't afford to stay on it. Women tend to marry, when you marry, you get another income type thing. And many women and I have talked about, it's not as burdensome financially for women. But if you're a single mother or what have you, it is. And I don't know. Do you think that's true or no? Or is it the money?
Well, I will say I have, because I've been a judge for so long, New York went through a period of time when judges' salaries were frozen for decades. And I'll disagree in a certain respect with respect to there's a second income. When I began my judicial career, I was a divorced mother with small children and raised them all too. And so it's hard. It was hard, but there are added pressures with respect to men if it is a sole income type situation. Yes, it does make it more difficult, but I also believe that there are amazing young black men who have these opportunities and to go to the white shoe law firms, and they take it. And it's difficult to get them to change their minds. But we're very fortunate in our state because one of my colleagues went the white collar law firm way, and then he sought the judiciary. Now on the court with me.
You know, let me say this. I think that there is another reason, in addition to dollars and cents. And I also think that, unfortunately, the judiciary has taken an unfair beating. That I think that there's also some concerns about our justice system, fairness. There are so many attacks on the judiciary, judicial independence, the rule of law. Certainly when judges make decisions, they are vilified in the press. There are security concerns, vilified by various officials. So I think that has something to do with it as well. And unfortunately, civics is not taught in the schools. And so very often, people have a misconception about the role of a judge, what a judge is supposed to do. Certainly, now judges are supposed to weigh in on the issues of the day, and we know that that is not the goal of a judge. And I would like to go back, if I may, to something that Judge Troutman said, because when I worked for a corporation counsel, the New York Law Department, that was my first job out of law school. And I had a supervisor, and I always call her names. I think it's important to honor those who have supported you. Betty Lawrence Lewis told me I was going to be a judge. I laughed at her. And I laughed at her because I did not see myself in that role. And obviously, she saw something in me that I did not see in myself. So there were people that saw things in Judge Troutman to say, go for this. And so eventually there was, a number of people that said, I think you should go for it. And when I worked for a judge as a court attorney, I then began to see myself in the role. And that's why I believe it's so important that we speak into the lives of other people. They could be young people, they can be our colleagues, friends, whomever, to say you can you can do it. And do it. And I just want to say about the election part, all of my comments concern New York County, because that is my experience, and certainly, the 5 boroughs of New York City, and each borough is different. But I can say, I think that when you're starting now, I see the elective process. Why? Because you are part of the community. You're running in your community, and if you've been active, more likely than not, people in your community, they know you, they know your work, they can speak for you. And then once you have experience, the appointed process is totally different. And so certainly you have more of a resume. And so I think both work, but there are things that could be tweaked.
I think also that there is an issue with respect to people not wanting to take opportunities because there's a stereotype of what that opportunity is. So, for instance, if you're a county court judge or a Supreme Court judge that's assigned to do felony cases, I've heard my colleagues say, I don't want to, quote, send people to jail. So I don't want to sit in that part. So they self-select out. So there's a lack of diversity on the bench. And what people fail to realize, that if you have people from diverse backgrounds and experiences overall, you are actually increasing the opportunity for there to be justice.
Yes.
You are ridding the system wherein every time a person of color comes in the courtroom, they see someone who doesn't look like them. So there's a fear, and for some reason in our society, there's a belief that if you're a person of color, you shouldn't be a prosecutor, you shouldn't be a criminal court judge. And I think that's oversimplification of what it is to be an advocate of justice.
Yeah. So let's shift a little. Thank you. That was excellent. What was the biggest challenge y'all had in becoming a judge? I mean, for me, it was I had to run so much. It was I never ran unopposed. I always ran opposed, and often because I was often the only woman, and definitely the only black woman. I was assigned. I'm the liberal radical type thing that nobody in Georgia should vote for, that kind of thing. Although each time I ran, I won more. I ran statewide. Okay, so my races were always statewide, which is, this is Georgia. Judge Troutman, is it justice? Do they use that term in New York, even on the high court? Judges, I just want to get the terms right.
We switch. I was a justice of the Supreme Court, and now I'm an associate judge. Court of Appeals.
Okay, so the Supreme Court, the people on the Supreme Court, which is like the Superior Court, are called justices.
Yes, but there's another oddity.
Yeah.
Lower town courts.
Yes.
Lower than our municipal courts.
Yes.
They're called justice. Town justice. Yes. Okay. So we're confusing.
That's fine. Okay, but be that as it may, running as much as I have, and then, there was at one point the governor of the state of Georgia declared I didn't have the correct Georgia values and put all of his resources to make sure I got defeated. We would run every 6 years, and I never got defeated, but it just wears you down when you don't have when you have so many people that don't want you to be where you are. So but of course I have to look at the bright side. There were thousands and thousands and thousands of people who did want me to be where I am. So that was my biggest challenge.
I think you're correct. When you run in a contested race, you value the fact that you serve the citizens of your jurisdiction, as opposed to, it's not that you don't feel that way if you're appointed, but there's something about the running for office process. And you also said something very important. It's expensive. In upstate New York, it was expensive.
Right.
And incurring indebtedness, I did, in order to run for office.
Right.
And it's more than just a notion. And also, there's another obstacle, going back to the beginning. If you are first generation, which I am, as a lawyer, as a college grad, you don't necessarily view yourself as, quote, being connected or a part of that process that allows you to become. So what happens is you have to learn about networking. And that is why it is important for all of us to lift as we climb. And Justice Marshall was correct, as he famously said. No one got where they are solely by lifting themselves up by their own bootstraps. They got there because someone bit down and gave them a hand.
Right.
That's what happened to me. And recently, even, I went to my law school, and it's not just people of color. There are other people with blue-collar black backgrounds. They had tears in their eyes. They said, looking at you, I see it possible. Now, a stereotype, you would say, but you're a majority person, so everything is easy. No. We sometimes get in our own way because we don't see things as possible.
Right. That's Judge Kennedy. Anything?
Yeah. I'm going to talk about my second election to Supreme Court because just like my election to civil court, and I was fortunate that I did not have a contested race, just the rigorous schedule of going to fundraisers, going to events to introduce yourselves to the various bar and community associations. And I'm not going to use balance because there is not a balance.
Right.
But you have to prioritize your time between your regular job. Okay, now I'm a judge. I have to still maintain my calendar.
You got to work.
Manage my staff, right? I have to do the laundry.
Right.
I have to go grocery shopping. Now, I'm not a mother, so I don't have that responsibility. But I'm someone's daughter. I'm someone's sweetheart. Right. I have to maintain and nurture those relationships. So it was always a bit tough about how to effectively manage campaigning, your regular job, and your family and love relationships. Because the bottom line is that when you are running, your family, your loved ones, they are also running. They are also involved in the process. It's not just you.
True.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that was a huge challenge for me when I started running. And it was one of the reasons I almost did not run, but my son was 3 and my daughter was 1. And I spent hours and hours and hours away from them. They're much older now, but I mean, that's just what you have to do.
That is a universal problem for women.
Yeah.
And even when you're married and you have a spouse at home, we as women don't give up that primary caretaker role. We hold on to it. And so there's always a joke for professional women. They'd say, I would like a wife, someone who's going to just step in. And for me, but for the fact that I have an amazing mother, and I'm blessed that she was able to be present at the Court of Appeals when I had my investiture. The school would call my mother before they would call me, pick up my kids if they were sick, and so on and so forth. But the guilt, I agree with Justice Kennedy. It's still there as a mom. And you cry. You're like, I'm missing my babies.
Yeah.
But you know what? I realized as they got older and they saw me go through campaigns and they saw me go through some difficult ones, and there was a time when I was going to quit, they said to me, you can't quit. And so you are actually, you're giving them an example of how to achieve their dreams when you don't even realize it becomes more than just your dream.
Yeah. Well, I went through the same thing. I got a divorce too in the midst of all of my move. I don't know if we hold on to being wife and mother so much as it is expected that you have to do everything. I mean, if I had had a husband, and that would really participate on the same level that I was doing it, I would have gladly given up but my first husband's idea of a nutritious dinner, and he was a good guy, but he's a man, and that meant different than a woman. So his idea of nutritional meal for the kids was Domino's. In the meantime, I'd be sitting on the bench in a murder trial trying to figure out how to get them a meat and 2 vegetables. Do you guys know anything about Morrison's cafeterias or S&S or anyway, we were just very popular in these meat and 2 joints because that's all I could do. And it's not, that to keep my, it's tough. I do think, and I'm going to be criticized for saying this, but men, even black men, there is a privilege that they expect to get by being married to somebody. Even my current husband, he expects.
I will have to say, I am blessed. I have a wonderful husband, and he makes everything else, the other words, he's removed them. He insisted that I allow him to walk beside me and help. And that wasn't
That's amazing.
But it's wonderful.
It's amazing. And I've had wonderful husbands too. My first husband changed his name. We both hyphenated our names. We did all this cool stuff that looked equal and all that. But look carefully when the bottom line is it's mainly women. I don't care how good the guy is. It's mainly you doing all the worrying and all the things. That's what I think. As good as a man might be, he still thinks that it's on you.
Well, Judge, I have to say, Judge, I'm kind of with Judge Troutman. Now, I do not have children. That is by choice. I love young people, but I made a conscious decision not to be a mother.
Right.
I'm a mother in other ways. As I said, I am not married, but I'm in a long-term relationship. And I will say this, that the person that I'm with now, one of the things that really made me intentional about pursuing a relationship with this gentleman, I never forget, I mentioned that I was going to a particular bar association for them to vet my qualifications and determine whether or not I would be approved. I never forget that he said to me, well, just remind me of the day, remind me of the time, because I'm going to pray for you. Now, as a woman of faith, that meant a lot to me.
Right.
That person was all in. And I'm not the best domestic person. He has the cooking skills, right? So he's the chef. But, regardless, if you're in a committed relationship or not married, you must have the support of your family and loved ones. Right. Because my mother, even when I ran for civil, she was affectionately known as the unpaid campaign manager. She was all in, passing out literature, talking me up. So you really have to have your family and friends involved because it can get intense. Right. And so when you have those, dark moments or a rough day, you have that angel network who will pick you right up.
That's right. I had, it sounds like all 3 of us had, because my mother moved in with me and, dropped my kids off, picked them up, this, that, took them to Boy Scout, Girl Scout, and all this, because I was just juggling. This is when I was between marriages, and she's 92 now. But yeah, it is. She's not well now. She's Alzheimer's disease, but she was a godsend. She just stayed with it, and I absolutely understand what you all think. But I just want to throw this out at the women that might be watching this, because I'm sometimes asked, and this isn't on the chart, but what is the most important thing you have to move forward in any career, really? And I think I always say, be careful who you choose to be your partner, because men can ruin a woman's career in a way that women tend not to ruin a man's career by just not stepping up, being supportive. You really need a rock, and you guys love that. I did too, but I'm mindful of the fact that I still do the bulk of the stuff. And maybe it's because in our blended family, my children are my children. There's this fiction, there are children, but they're really they're mine, and I have to protect that. So, but you have to be very, very careful I've seen so many women get derailed by guys that they shouldn't be with when they're professional women. I'll just say that. It's not a class thing either. It's a are they going to look for you? Yeah, are they really
mindset, value?
Exactly. Are they going to value and look after you and all that?
And I can relate to that. If I can relate to that, because I use that term angel network, and that's so important to me. So it's a small cadre of people that I can go to, that I can bounce things off of. And those are the people that have been with me from day one. Yeah. They celebrate my successes. If I make a misstep, they call me out on that, and I appreciate that. They give me guidance. They refer me to other networks. So I think it's so, so important to have an angel network. But I will agree with you, Judge, that your partner, if it's marriage or something else, they have to be with you. It can't be they are competing with you.
Exactly.
Jealous of you.
Right.
They have to be with you and support you. And sometimes you're going to be the star of the show. Right. You're going to shine. And that person has to have enough self-worth and self-love to know, what, I have to let her shine. I have to step back.
Right.
But then there are times when
that tends to be the woman's role. So, you've got to have if it's a guy relationship, it's got to be a man who's willing to do that. And there aren't all that many. Let's be honest. There just aren't all that many men willing to do that.
But I think one of the things is, in addition to who that significant other is in your life,
right?
There's one thing that no one teaches. They don't teach it in law school. Right. And I think many young people, when you assume the role of judge, right, you're not prepared for. No one says, this is how you, once you get the judgeship, this is what you should know. And I've spoken to a friend about this. It's, now you're a judge. What do I need to know? You're not necessarily prepared for isolation.
Yes.
You're not necessarily prepared for, if you do something, you're young, you want to go out and party. Now, fortunately for me, I've always led my life in a very reserved manner. That's just who I am.
Right.
And so when I was a young prosecutor, there was no concern that I was going to be on the news or anything. But we're not prepared to get the road. You don't understand that if you say the wrong thing, it could be all over the news.
Right.
Within minutes of your saying it. Right. And now with the internet, it'll be on. Right. So people, there needs to be a course taught about what it actually means to be a judge, right, not just getting the position. And that is what the focus often is getting the position. Right. And so people aren't prepared. that you can't just trust anyone. If you're a judge, you can't have your friends appearing in front of you.
Right.
The appearance of impropriety, etc., that our judicial ethics teaches us.
Right.
So you give up your First Amendment rights.
Right.
You do.
You do.
People aren't prepared for that.
Right. And gosh, this has been great. Are you both pleased that you chose this career? Or did you choose this career, or did it choose you, I guess? Because I'm hearing that maybe other people chose you and you like it.
I think the career chose me, and I want to go to my current position in the appellate division. I would say for the past 7 or 8 years, I have participated in a particular bar association function, and I had someone approach me to say, "Did you ever think about becoming an appellate court judge?" And I said, no, because I was really maybe thinking about going to the commercial division, applying if there was going to be an opening. That's a whole nother story that offline I'll share. But and the person said, your name came up, and I'd like you to meet with that person. I did that. This person had some wonderful information to share. I submitted my application, and now I'm an associate justice. I have to tell you, this is the best job ever. I never saw myself in this position. And this goes to something Judge Troutman said. I am the first in my family to go to college to have a higher education. And so this is beyond my wildest imaginations. And so even with respect to becoming a judge, I always wanted to be a lawyer, but I really wanted to make my mark first on Madison Avenue. I wanted to work in fashion, advertising, public relations, but the economy saw it another way.
Right.
So I said, you know what? I'm not going to return back to New York because I went to Penn State University without a game plan. So I'm going to move up my plan. I'm going to go to law school since I don't have a job. And, the rest is history. And people, always say, did you prepare? And I say, you know what? I've been preparing all along, but it was not conscious. And what I mean by that, I've always been involved in the community. I've always been involved in bar associations. I was a litigator for Corporation Counsel. I was a supervisor as well as Corporation Counsel. I clerked for a judge in the commercial division and the appellate division. So it's all of these experiences that I bring to the table. And so when I speak to law students, young attorneys, I tell them that I've been very blessed. I've been very fortunate, and I recognize that I'm privileged. But that as they think about what they may want to do, it's really important to be strategic, because the workplace, particularly the legal profession, has changed so much from when I graduated from law school. And I think that technology will even change the landscape further. So I really suggest that they be strategic now in their thoughts.
So that's very good. So I'm going to wrap this up. We're getting close to the end of the hour, but I'm going to shoot this out. What do you think there'll be much impact with the newest Supreme Court Associate Justice Jackson? Do you think that'll help be good for the future of the legal marketplace and or the bench, especially in terms of diversity and demographics? What do you guys think? Is this a good thing?
I will tell you that oftentimes what the public perceives goes on in the courthouse is not that which actually happens.
Right.
It is always a good thing when you have a diverse voice in the room. And having a new voice in the room can sometimes lower the temperature with respect to some things that may have occurred in the past. I think it is amazing. It is wonderful that Justice Jackson has joined the court. And I was interviewed with respect to her joining. And one of the things that I get to share with her, she's the first on the United States Supreme Court as a black woman. Mm-hmm. We both share the same number. I'm the 116th judge of the New York Court of Appeals. She's the 116th of the United States Supreme Court. And but again, it's most important that we not be the last. Before me was Sheila Abdul Salam. And I stand on her shoulders and many others. And so it is important to encourage her. You can be a perfect stranger, and we should all send our well wishes to her.
Yeah.
And she can't change things overnight.
Right.
Building. And but it's important that she be there. It is important that she use her voice, because even when you think that people don't hear you, you are saying something that can make a difference. And I will tell you, I will go back to your earlier question. I didn't choose the law chose me. And I didn't even want to be in a courtroom. And when I tell young people that they don't believe me, they don't believe that I was shy. I didn't want to speak in front of groups. And what happened was I became an assistant district attorney. And there was a young woman whom the system forgot. The office that I worked for did not send her a victim advocate. And on that day, this young woman, fresh out of law school, myself, had to speak for her. And it was only because I was able to convince her that the father of her child, literally causing her to lose her eye, was not okay, that she testified. So the law has great power. So yes, I applaud, and I'm excited about Justice Jackson's maiden voyage on the court.
Oh, fantastic. That's good.
Let me say, Judge, I cried. To see a woman, a black woman, wearing sister locks.
Yeah.
I have sister locks. And there was a blog saying that the newest Supreme Court justice wore sister locks. I spread that all throughout.
Okay.
And the fact that I am a dark-skinned female.
Right.
And let's tell the truth.
No, I got it.
Very often, blackness isn't celebrated in this country, particularly if you are of a darker hue.
Right.
Well, she's of a darker hue, like myself. And so that was something.
Yeah, a dark-skinned black woman with natural hair.
Absolutely.
When I was coming out in the 80s, was just not, that didn't happen. The few women that got through were lighter skinned and all had perms. And that I guess no one paid much attention.
Yeah, and if I can add, Judge, if I can add, also the fact that she has a background in criminal law, she brings a total different perspective. If I can add the fact, the recent appointments that we've seen, Asian persons who are openly from the LGBTQ community, Latino, Indian heritage, this is all important. And the fact that we have to change the narrative about if you go to a certain school, excellence only belongs in a certain school. That's incorrect. I mean, we see that with the HBCUs. So we have to broaden our perspective about where excellence is. And it's not just
and I simply add the one thing that she showed us was grace.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
She took a breath,
Yeah.
and we all took that breath with her.
Yeah.
And she is going to take her rightful seat
Yeah.
when the court opens.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Grace under fire. Absolutely.
Yeah. Which, to be honest with you, our ancestor women have been doing for years and years and years. So well, thank you for this. It's been a pleasure.